So 13x equals 36 times 13. 36 times 13 is 468. So you've got 13x equals 468. And you just divide by 13. So x equals 36. So you know that this leg is 36. Okay? So you guys try these and then we'll go over those. Okay? So give those two a try. And, well, let me do one of them with you actually because these are a little tricky. And then we'll look at some of these other ones down here. So we've got, on this one, we've got a segment and a leg. Okay, but we don't have anything with the altitude, right? So since we don't know anything about the altitude, but we know a leg, okay, first thing is identifying which one of these two you should use. So we've got a leg, but no altitude. So you can eliminate this one because there's nothing with the altitude, but we do have a leg. So use this one, hypotenuse, leg, segment. So the question first is, what's the hypotenuse? Well, the hypotenuse is the length all the way across here. So the trick is you've got x and 9. You've got to add those together to get the hypotenuse. So your hypotenuse is actually x plus 9 over the leg, 15, equals the leg again, 15, over the segment, which is just 9. Now you can cross multiply. 15 times 15 is 225. Now when you do 9 times this, you need to do 9 times x and 9 times 9. 9 times x is 9x, and then 9 times the 9 is 81. So here's our equation. So now we subtract 81 from 225, and you get 144. Then bring down the 9x and divide by 9. And 144 divided by 9 is going to be 16. So we know that this little piece right here has to be 16. Okay, on this challenge problem, let's do it, and I'll let y'all try the next ones. Right here, you've got an altitude, and you've got the hypotenuse is x, and that you know this segment, right? But we don't know anything about the legs. So on this one, we should use segment, altitude, altitude, segment. So what's one of our segments? Well, we know one of them is 64 over the altitude, we know is 48, equals the altitude again, 48, over the other segment. So here's the tricky part. There's nothing there for this segment, so we've got to put something there. Well, we know that this segment's 64, and this whole hypotenuse is x, right? And remember, these two segments have to add up to be x. So what we can use to represent this one is the whole thing x minus 64, this piece. If you take this piece away from the whole thing, it's going to leave you with this piece. Right? So that segment, we'll use x minus 64 to represent that segment. Now you can cross multiply. 48 times 48 is 2304. And then we've got 64 times x minus 64. Again, make sure you multiply 64 by both of them. 64 times x is 64x, and 64 times a minus 64 is going to give you minus 4096. All right, so now we can solve by adding 4096 to 2004. So that cancels. We've got 64x equals 4096 plus 2304 is 6400. So then we just divide by 64, and 6400 divided by 64 is 100. So we've got x, this long hypotenuse is 100. Alright, so I'll let you guys try these two problems right here. See if you can find the each missing variable. So you've got multiple missing variables here, and you need to use both SAAS and HLLS to find the missing variables. So give those a try, and then we'll go over them. Okay, so this first one, let's first see if we can find the segments, because we can't find the altitude, right? If we do segment, altitude, altitude, segment, we can't find the altitude unless we know the segments already, and we don't know what the segments are. So in order to find the altitude, we have to first know the segments. So the first thing we need to do is hypotenuse leg, leg segment. We know the hypotenuse, the longest leg is, or longest side is 5, over the leg. So we can put it over 3, this leg, equals that leg again, 3, over the segment over here on this side with this leg. So if this leg is 3, the segment over here with it is B. We can use this to find B. So 5 times B is 5B. 3 times 3 is 9. Then we divide by 5. So B equals 9 divided by 5, which is 1.8. So I know B now is 1.8. All right, now let's find the other segment. So doing the same thing, but using the other leg. We use 4 as our leg, we can find 8. So hypotenuse again is 5. Over the leg this time we'll use is 4, equals the leg again 4, over the segment with 4 is A. So we've got 5 times A equals 4 times 4, which is 16. And then you divide by 5, and 16 divided by 5 is 3.2. So I know that this segment is 3.2. And you can tell 3.2 and 1.8, those will add up to be 5, right, to give you the whole hypotenuse. Then lastly, we can find the altitude using segment altitude, altitude segment, now that we know the two segments. So I'll do segment 1.8 over the altitude h equals the altitude again, h, over the other segment, 3.2. We cross multiply, h times h is h squared, and then 3.2 times 1.8 gives us 5.76. Then we take the square root to get h by itself, and the square root of 5.76 is 2.4. So I now know that the altitude is 2.4. All right, hopefully you're able to figure that out. Now I'm going to clear that, and let's do the last one. So on this one, same idea, you do it the exact same way. You need to find the two segments, all right, and you need to find the altitude. So before we find the altitude, we've got to find the segments. So I'm going to do hypotenuse 50 over a leg 48 equals the leg again, 48, over the segment that goes with that leg, which is y. So 50 times y is 50y, and 48 times 48 gives you 2,304. Then we divide by 50, and 2304 divided by 50 gives us 46.08. So y is 46.08. Now do the same thing, hypotenuse leg, leg segment to find x. So 50 over our leg 14, so we're going to switch to the other leg this time, equals the leg 14 over our segment is x. So 50 times x equals 14 times 14, which is 196. Then we divide by 50, and x equals 3.92. And if you add 3.92 and 46.08, you'll see that it's going to add up to be 50. So we know what x and y are now. Those are our segments. We can write that in, 46.08, and then the other segment's 3.92. So now to find the altitude, we do segment altitude, altitude segment. So one segment's 46.08 over the altitude z equals the altitude z over the other segment, 3.92. Remember, it's SAAS, segment altitude, altitude segment. So I cross multiply, z times z is z squared, and then 46.08 times 3.92 gives us this really weird decimal, 180.6336. Then you just take the square root of that to get z, and when you take the square root of that, you get 13.44. Exactly. So that ends up being not so bad of an answer for our altitude. All right, so that's all for segment, altitude, altitude segment, and hypotenuse leg, leg segment. If you have any questions on it, feel free to ask. Other than that, get to work on your practice. Thanks.